I'll never forget the moment my grandson spoke his first words to me. He was 7 years old, and everyone, doctors, therapists, his own parents, believed he would never speak at all. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what he said, and when he chose to say it. It was 3 words. Just 3 simple words that came out of his mouth 30 seconds after my daughter and son-in-law drove away. 3 words that made my blood run cold. 3 words that saved my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand everything that led to that moment. You need to understand why nobody believed me when I tried to tell them what happened. And you need to understand why, even now, 2 years later, I still check my locks twice before bed. My name is Dorothy Brennan, and I'm 73 years old. I live in a small ranch house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the same house where I raised my daughter, Jennifer. It's modest, but it's mine, paid off after 40 years of mortgage payments. The neighborhood used to be filled with young families, but these days, it's mostly retirees like me and a handful of working folks who keep to themselves. Jennifer married a man named Robert Castellano 12 years ago. Robert's a pharmaceutical sales representative, the kind of guy who wears expensive suits and drives a leased BMW he can barely afford. I never warmed to him, if I'm being honest. There was something too polished about him, too rehearsed. But Jennifer loved him, and he treated her well enough, so I kept my opinions to myself. Their son, my grandson William, was born 7 years ago. He was a beautiful baby, bright blue eyes, a head full of dark curls, and the most serene expression I'd ever seen on an infant. But as the months passed, Jennifer started worrying. William didn't babble like other babies. He didn't respond to his name. By his 2nd birthday, he still hadn't spoken a single word. The diagnosis came when he was 3, selective mutism with features of autism spectrum disorder. That's what the developmental pediatrician called it. William understood everything. His comprehension was actually above average, but he simply didn't speak. Not to his parents, not to doctors, not to anyone. Jennifer threw herself into therapies. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy. You name it, William tried it. Robert footed the bills without complaint, I'll give him that. But nothing worked. William remained silent. As the years went on, William developed his own ways of communicating. He'd point, nod, shake his head. He learned some basic sign language. He was gentle, observant, and incredibly smart. His eyes were always watching, always taking everything in. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me with such intensity that it felt like he could see straight through to my soul. I loved that boy with everything in me. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Jennifer would drop him off at my house while she ran errands or went to her part-time job at the library. We'd spend hours together, me reading to him drawing elaborate pictures, both of us content in our quiet companionship. I never minded that he didn't speak. I talked enough for both of us. Now, before I continue, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city and state in the comments below. I love knowing that people from all over are listening to these stories. The accident happened on a Tuesday in October, 6 months before the incident I'm about to tell you about. I was coming home from the grocery store, my trunk loaded with bags. It was raining. Not a downpour, but that misty rain that makes everything slick. I lived on Maple Street, a quiet road with minimal traffic, which is why I didn't see the car coming. I was halfway across the street, juggling my purse and an armful of grocery bags, when I heard the engine rev. A dark sedan came around the corner too fast, hydroplaning slightly. I froze, the worst thing you can do, and the car clipped me on my right side. I don't remember much about the impact itself. One moment I was standing, the next I was on the wet pavement, my groceries scattered around me, my hip screaming in pain. The car didn't stop. It sped away, and I never got a good look at the driver or the license plate. Mrs. Patterson from next door found me and called 911. I spent 3 days in the hospital with a fractured hip, 2 broken ribs, and a severe concussion. The doctors said I was lucky. At my age, injuries like these can be fatal. Jennifer was beside herself with worry. She insisted I come stay with them during my recovery, but I refused. I'm an independent woman, always have been. I agreed to a home health aide for the first few weeks and promised to call if I needed anything. The police investigated the hit and run but never found the driver. Probably a drunk driver, the officer told me. They panic and run. Happens more than you'd think. I accepted that explanation. Why wouldn't I? But here's what I didn't tell anyone, not even Jennifer. 2 days before the accident, I'd received a strange phone call. It was a man's voice, muffled, like he was speaking through fabric. He didn't say much, just asked if I was Dorothy Brennan, if I lived at 847 Maple Street, and if I lived alone. When I asked who was calling, he hung up. I convinced myself it was a wrong number, or a scam call. We get those all the time these days, don't we? But after the accident, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, it hadn't been random. Still, I had no proof. No reason to think otherwise. So I pushed the thought away and focused on healing. My recovery was slow. The fractured hip was particularly troublesome. I needed a walker for the first 2 months, then graduated to a cane. Jennifer came by every day, often bringing William with her. Those visits were the highlight of my recovery. William would sit beside me on the couch, drawing pictures or doing puzzles while I rested. He seemed particularly attentive during those weeks, always watching me with those intense blue eyes. Sometimes he'd pat my hand gently, as if to reassure me that everything would be okay. It was during this recovery period that I started noticing strange things. Small things at first. I'd come home from a doctor's appointment to find my back door unlocked, even though I was certain I'd locked it. Items in my house would be moved. Nothing major, just little things like a book I'd left on the coffee table now sitting on the kitchen counter, or a photo frame turned at a slightly different angle. I blamed it on the concussion. The doctors had warned me that I might experience some confusion or memory problems for a while. Then the phone calls started. At least twice a week, my phone would ring. When I answered, there'd be silence on the other end, not dead air, but breathing. Someone was there, listening. After 10 or 15 seconds, they'd hang up. I reported it to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless the caller made threats. Probably just a robocall with a glitch, the officer suggested. But I knew better. Someone was checking to see if I was home. One evening in March, for months after the accident, I was watching television when I heard a noise from my backyard. It sounded like someone rattling my fence gate. I froze, muted the TV, and listened. There it was again, definitely the sound of the metal latch on my gate being tested. My heart hammered in my chest. I grabbed my phone and my cane and slowly made my way to the back door. Through the window, I could see my dark backyard, illuminated only by the neighbor's porch light bleeding over the fence. I saw a shadow move. Someone was in my backyard. I called 911 immediately. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me while I described what I'd heard and seen. Within 6 minutes, though it felt like an hour, 2 police officers arrived. They searched my backyard thoroughly with flashlights. The gate was indeed unlatched, though I'd locked it that morning. They found footprints in the flower bed beneath my bedroom window, fresh enough that the soil was still disturbed. Someone was definitely here, the younger officer confirmed. We'll increase patrols in your neighborhood, Mrs. Brennan. Do you have any idea who might want to frighten you? An ex-husband, maybe? Family dispute? I shook my head. I'd been widowed for 20 years, had no enemies I could think of, no disputes with anyone. Has anything else unusual happened recently? The older officer asked. I told them about the accident, the strange phone calls, the feeling that someone had been in my house. As I spoke, I could see the officers exchanging glances. Mrs. Brennan, the older one said gently, have you considered that maybe you're just feeling vulnerable after your accident? Sometimes trauma can make us hypervigilant. I bristled at that. I wasn't some paranoid old woman jumping at shadows. But I could see they'd already made up their minds. After they left, I called Jennifer. She came over immediately, Robert in tow. Jennifer was frightened for me and wanted me to stay with them, at least for a few days. But Robert seemed annoyed. Mom, you're scaring Jennifer, he said. He never called me Mom unless Jennifer was around. The police said it was probably just kids messing around. You need to calm down. This isn't healthy. I know what I heard, Robert, I replied firmly. And I know what I saw. Maybe you should talk to your doctor, he suggested. After a head injury like yours, sometimes people experience. I'm not crazy, I snapped. Nobody said you were crazy, Jennifer interjected, shooting Robert a look. We're just worried about you. Please come stay with us for a while. I finally agreed to spend the weekend at their house, just to ease Jennifer's mind. I packed a small bag, and we drove to their place in the suburbs, a large 2-story house in a development full of identical houses with identical lawns. That weekend was uneventful. I slept in their guest room, played with William, and tried to convince myself that maybe Robert was right. Maybe I was just paranoid. But Monday morning, when Robert drove me back to my house, I knew immediately that something was wrong. The front door was locked, just as I'd left it. But inside, things were different. My favorite coffee mug, the one with a cardinal painted on it, the one my late husband had given me, was sitting on the kitchen counter. I distinctly remembered packing it in my bag to take to Jennifer's house, but I'd forgotten it on the table by the door at the last minute. Now here it was on the counter, as if someone had made coffee with it. I checked the rest of the house with shaking hands. In my bedroom, my jewelry box had been opened. Nothing was missing. Not my modest pearl necklace, not my wedding ring that I kept in a velvet box, nothing. But someone had been through it. I called the police again. Different officers came this time, took a report, dusted for fingerprints. They found nothing conclusive. "There's no sign of forced entry, Mrs. Brennan," one of them said. "Are you sure you didn't move these things yourself before you left?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I thanked them for coming and locked the door behind them. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house settling, every rustle of wind against the windows, made me bolt upright in bed. I kept my phone on the nightstand, my finger hovering over the emergency call button. I was being targeted. I was sure of it now. But by whom? And why? If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future stories. Trust me, what I'm about to tell you next will absolutely shock you. 3 weeks passed. I installed new locks on all my doors and windows. I bought a security camera for my front door. One of those video doorbells that records motion. Jennifer checked on me daily, and I tried to act like everything was fine. But I was constantly on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder. It was a Thursday in early April when it finally happened. The day that changed everything. Jennifer called that morning to ask if I could watch William for a few hours. She and Robert had a last-minute meeting with their financial advisor. Something about refinancing their mortgage, and their regular babysitter was sick. "Of course," I said. I always enjoyed time with William. They arrived at 11 o'clock. Jennifer looked stressed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes tired. "Thank you so much, Mom," she said, kissing my cheek. "We should be back by 2 at the latest. William's already had lunch, but there are snacks in his bag if he gets hungry." Robert barely looked at me as he headed back to the car, already on his phone. Jennifer gave William a hug, reminded him to be good for Grandma, and they left. I watched their car pull away from my living room window, then turned to William with a smile. "Well, buddy, what should we do today? Want to read some books? Draw some pictures?" William stood in the middle of my living room, his small hands clenched at his sides. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, urgent, almost desperate. Then he opened his mouth and he spoke. "Grandma, you have to run." I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. 7 years of silence, and now, "They're coming to kill you," William continued, his voice small but clear. "You have to run right now." My legs went weak. I grabbed the back of my couch for support. "William," I whispered, "you can talk." "I've always been able to talk," he said, his words coming faster now. "Grandma, please, there's no time. They're coming. They'll be here in less than 5 minutes." "Who's coming?" "William, what are you talking about?" "Dad," he said, and his blue eyes filled with tears. "Dad is coming to kill you. Him and another man. They're going to make it look like an accident, like a robbery. Please, Grandma, you have to believe me. You have to run." The room spun. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of delusion, a hallucination from the head injury that had never fully healed. "William, sweetheart, I don't understand. There's no time to explain." His voice rose, panicked. "I heard them talking last night. Dad thought I was asleep, but I was listening. They're coming here right now. They left Mom at the bank on purpose. Dad told her the meeting was at noon, but it's actually at 1. He wanted time to come here without her." My mind reeled. Robert wanted me dead? But why?" As if reading my thoughts, William said, "It's because of Grandpa's insurance money. The money that's supposed to be mine. Dad's been stealing from me. He's in trouble, bad trouble. And you know about the account because you're on it. He said he couldn't risk you checking the statements. My late husband's life insurance policy. We'd set up a trust for William when he was born, $200,000 that he'd receive when he turned 18. I was listed as a co-trustee with Jennifer, just for oversight. But I'd never actually checked the account. I'd trusted Robert and Jennifer to manage it. "William, Grandma, please." Tears streamed down his face. "I don't want you to die. We have to go now." Something in his voice, in his eyes, broke through my shock. Whether I understood or not, whether this made sense or not, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. William believed every word he was saying. And if there was even a chance he was right. "Okay," I said, my training as a former nurse kicking in. "Stay calm. Move fast. Okay, baby. We're going. I grabbed my purse and my phone. William's small hand gripped mine as we headed for the back door. Not the front, where someone might see us. My car's out front, I said. We'll have to. No, William said urgently. Dad knows your car. We have to hide first. The Pattersons' house. Mrs. Patterson has that tall fence with the hedge. We can hide there and you can call for help. Smart boy. I didn't argue. We slipped out my back door, across my small yard, and squeezed through a gap in the fence that I'd never bothered to fix. Mrs. Patterson's yard was overgrown. She'd been in assisted living for 3 months, which provided cover. We'd barely hidden behind her garden shed when I heard it. A car pulling into my driveway. Through a gap in the hedge, I could see my front yard. Robert's BMW sat in my driveway. But he wasn't alone. A second man got out of the passenger side, tall, heavy-set, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. I didn't recognize him. My blood turned to ice as I watched Robert pull something from his trunk. Even from this distance, I could see what it was. A crowbar. They were really going to do it. They were really going to kill me. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Dorothy Brennan, I whispered. I'm at 847 Maple Street in Cedar Rapids. My son-in-law is at my house right now with another man. They're planning to kill me. Please, send help immediately. Ma'am, are you in a safe location? I'm hiding in my neighbor's yard with my grandson. Please hurry. Officers are on their way, ma'am. Stay on the line with me. Through the hedge, I watched Robert and the other man approach my front door. Robert used a key, my key, the spare I'd given Jennifer for emergencies, and they went inside. William pressed against me, trembling. I wrapped my arm around him and held him close. You saved my life, I whispered into his hair. You brave, brilliant boy. We waited. It felt like hours, but was probably less than 3 minutes before Robert and the other man came back outside. They were arguing, their voices raised enough that I could hear them even from our hiding spot. Not here. Where the hell could she have gone? Maybe she saw us coming. She doesn't know anything. She's just an old woman. That's when the police cars arrived, 3 of them, sirens blazing. What happened next was chaos. Robert tried to run. The other man, I later learned his name was Victor Malloy, a former cellmate of Robert's from a drunk driving stint years ago, pulled a gun. Officers tackled them both. There was shouting, the click of handcuffs, the Miranda rights being read. I held William through all of it, my hand over his eyes, so he wouldn't have to watch his father being arrested. The full story came out over the following weeks, pieced together from police investigations, financial records, and eventually, Robert's own confession when he realized the evidence against him was overwhelming. Robert had been embezzling from William's trust fund for nearly 3 years. What had started as a small loan he'd intended to pay back had spiraled into a full-blown theft. He'd gambled, made bad investments, and maintained a lifestyle he couldn't afford. The account that should have held $200,000 had less than $30,000 in it. He'd been cooking the books, creating fake statements that he showed Jennifer during their annual reviews. She'd had no idea. But I was a problem. As co-trustee, I had legal access to the real statements. I'd never exercised that right, but I could at any time. And Robert had learned from a colleague that banks were cracking down, starting to send statements to all trustees, not just the primary one. He couldn't risk me seeing the truth. The hit-and-run accident? That was his first attempt. He'd paid Victor Malloy $5,000 to run me down. Victor had gotten cold feet at the last second, and only clipped me instead of hitting me head-on. The break-ins, the phone calls, the footsteps in my yard, all Robert and Victor trying to terrorize me, hoping I'd die of a heart attack or a stroke. Hoping I'd fall and re-injure myself. When that didn't work, they'd planned a more direct approach. The home invasion was supposed to look like a robbery gone wrong. I'd be struck with the crowbar, my modest valuables taken, and Robert would have an alibi. The banking meeting. Victor would disappear with his payment of $10,000 and a promise to keep quiet. It would have worked, too, if not for William. In the aftermath, with Robert in jail and Jennifer struggling to process her husband's betrayal, I finally learned William's secret. We were sitting in my living room, newly equipped with a proper security system, when I asked him the question that had been burning in my mind. William, sweetheart, why didn't you speak before? Why did you let everyone think you couldn't? He was quiet for a long moment, coloring in a picture of a dinosaur. Then he said, because Dad was mean when I talked. My heart broke. The first time I talked, I was 3, William continued, not looking up from his drawing. I said no when Dad tried to make me eat something I didn't like. He got really angry. He grabbed my arm hard and told me that I needed to be quiet, that children who talk back get punished. Jennifer, sitting beside me, let out a choked sob. I got scared, William said simply. So I stopped talking around him. But then the doctors said I couldn't talk at all, and Dad seemed happy about that. He liked that I was quiet. He'd tell Mom, "At least we don't have to deal with a mouthy kid." So I stayed quiet. "But you talked to me that day," I said softly. "You saved my life by speaking." William finally looked up at me, those bright blue eyes serious beyond his years. "I had to," he said. "I heard Dad and that other man talking in the garage the night before. I snuck downstairs because I wanted a glass of water, and I heard them planning. They said tomorrow, Thursday, when they dropped me off at your house. They were going to hurt you." He put down his crayon. "I knew if I told Mom, she wouldn't believe me. She never sees the bad things Dad does. But I knew you would listen, Grandma. I knew you'd believe me if I told you. So I decided to talk just this once to save you." "You did save me," I said, pulling him into a hug. "You absolutely saved me." "I'm sorry I didn't talk before," he whispered. "I'm sorry I let you think I couldn't." "Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for. You were protecting yourself. And when it mattered most, you found your voice. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen." That was 2 years ago. Robert is currently serving 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement, attempted murder, and a handful of other charges. Victor Malloy got 12 years. Neither will be eligible for parole for at least 8 years. Jennifer divorced Robert immediately. It took her months of therapy to process what had happened, to accept that the man she'd loved had been willing to kill her mother for money. She's stronger now, though. She's working full-time at the library and going back to school for her master's degree. William, my miracle grandson, is talking now. Not constantly, and never unless he feels safe, but he's working with a therapist who specializes in selective mutism. He's in 2nd grade and doing well. He still draws elaborate pictures, still watches everything with those intense blue eyes. And every Tuesday and Thursday he comes to visit me. We read books, work on puzzles, and talk. Really talk. Last week he asked me, "Grandma, do you ever get scared?" Remembering what almost happened. I thought about lying, about telling him that everything was fine. But William deserves honesty. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Sometimes I have nightmares. But then I wake up and remember that I'm safe, and you're safe, and the people who wanted to hurt us are locked away." "I have nightmares too," he said quietly. "I dream that I didn't warn you in time, that I was too scared to talk." I took his small hands in mine. "But you weren't too scared," I told him. "When it mattered most, you found your courage. You found your voice. And you saved my life. That's what I want you to remember. Not the scary parts, but the brave parts." He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, William. More than you'll ever know. Sometimes I think about how close I came to dying. How if William had stayed silent just one more day, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. People always say that children should be seen and not heard. That quiet children are good children. But William's silence nearly cost me my life, and his voice, his brave, beautiful voice, saved it. These days, I listen when William talks. I listen to every word, every observation, every question. Because I learned something important that day in April. Sometimes the quietest voices have the most important things to say. And sometimes 3 simple words, "You have to run," can mean the difference between life and death. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a good thriller. What did you think of William's revelation? Did you suspect Robert from the beginning, or were you shocked? Let me know in the comments. And remember to subscribe for more incredible stories just like this one. Until next time, stay safe out there. You never know who might be watching, or what secrets the people around you might be hiding. And most importantly, listen to the children in your life. They see more than we think. This is Dorothy's story, and I'm grateful I survived to tell it.